Hello, my name is Milani Douglas. Welcome to another episode of the Curative Collective. The Curative Collective is a part of our series here at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. As a part of Reclamation, Reclamation is a online portal exhibition about remedies, recipes, and rituals. And today we are so excited to have Makeda Thomas join us. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Happy Monday. Makeda is going to open up with a reading from her upcoming work, The Light Fantastical, and then we'll have a chance to come back and have some wonderful discussion. Makeda, over to you.
She was the daughter of a daughter of a daughter, herself the mother of my great grandmother, Christiana, Mami Dora, mother of my grandmother, Sheila Virginia, mother to my mother, Lynette Diane. I am her daughter and mother to a daughter, Naya Love. She was the daughter of a daughter of a daughter, herself the mother of my great grandmother, who was the mother of my grandmother, Alma, mother of my father. I am his daughter and mother of a daughter, Naya Love. This is for her. The work, a recollection in which I revisit and revise my own earlier versions of work around my family's history, and the restoration of a personal and professional archive lost in a 2018 house fire. The work motions to simultaneously deconstruct the performativities, politics, methodologies, and aesthetics of the archive, while conjuring a new archive in which there is space for imagining and connection among blood ties and beyond. No, it would not be left to family or public records, both fallible as their records with incorrect dates of birth or death, omissions due to the social structures of the respective times, or additions which bend to the will of the recorder, as I've often witnessed in my role as family archivist, which I took on when I was 16. My work, and everybody have their own work to do, is to create a fluidity, a movement between lineage, narrative, and self-generated records, a recollection of self. I filled the space from the loss of information due to fire, enslavement, colonization, with a radical imagining, quoting Saidiya Hartman. To generate this new archive, a free archive, I turned to movement, performance, dance, art to guide what becomes part of it, how it might be used today and in the future. I engaged the choreographic literally, and in the sense that it enacts multiple ways of participating in and making of the world. That is a performance practice. It is choreographed and improvised, lived and imagined, both ephemeral and concerned with the archive. It is planting and mass. I include birth stories, where, how women birth, details of their experiences, histories of naming, dreams, recipes and sayings, healing knowledges, inherited gems of wisdoms, and made artifacts, all serving as launch pads into my family's history, but also items that are in my home today. The artifacts include a tiny little thing, which is a 14-foot birthing cloth used in the birth of my second child, Naya Love, which was exhibited at North Carolina's Turchin Center for the Visual Arts in 2019. And Auntie Girlie's old kitchen stool made it home at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in Trinidad and covered in pages from Frida Kahlo's diary. This is a tracing of her story, of matrilineal descent from my ancestresses. I trace a path from Ayuri, land of the hummingbird, the island now known as Trinidad, where I was born, as was my mother, to the Garinagu, mixed African and indigenous people of the Euromain, the island now known as St. Vincent, where my grandmother and great-grandmother were born. Before that, I must imagine she, great-great-grandmother, indigenous as she was. I trace, knowing that the tracing will not be fully legible until my daughter, born on the island of Shells, now known as Brooklyn or Long Island, has spoken, as she surely will. She was Alma, my grandmother, a Jamette who cried if there came a carnival where she could not play mass in San Fernando. I imagine what it meant for Alma to leave the Moruga country life or the big city to become a bail bondswoman in 1950s pre-independence Trinidad. I imagine her wanting to be free of the fuckery of it all. She loved to dance. She was Shirley, Alma's daughter, who was called too bright too many times because she had impeccable style. She was Sheila, my grandmother, who was best friends with her mother until the day she died. I imagine my grandmother had a great deal more to do with my grandfather's wealth and success than had been credited. She died of breast cancer. She was Mommy Dora, my great-grandmother, who then raised all 12 of Sheila's children until she too died months later. She was Auntie Girlie, a cousin of my grandmother, who became my grandmother. Her singing is heard in my short film, Ramguli Trace, and her recipe for kingfish pilau is in my master's dissertation. She was Stacy, my cousin, the older family archivist, the keeper of immense knowledge, the one I went to fill the spaces. I fill these spaces with myself, my experience, this life in this body. These women, my ancestresses, are portals through which I can now cycle up. So while this work is a redress of the pockets of mythologies, fragments of discourse, it is a way, a practice which mends inheritances so that the structure of my family softens like a tributary, becomes a desire line, that meandering foot edge path of earth, and the most efficient route to the end or beginning of the mother line. This is an ame to the process of decolonization, a project of reparations, and the praxis of freedom that motion towards Black radical feminist futures. Give thanks.
Wonderful. I thank you so much for sharing that with us. Just take a moment to give you a chance to take a deep breath. I know that when we share, sometimes and also just to take a chance for us to take a deep breath after receiving. There's so much in that really sets the framework for our conversation that we're having today. And it also connects some dots for me as far as looking at your work and looking at how you use food, how you use dance, how you use movement, and also the presence of the archives in your work. And there's so many, I feel like when I talk to a lot of women artists, there's a huge dance that we are all doing with the archives, our personal archives, our family's archives, and how it butts up against the public collection of census and the proper quote unquote archives. So that we also know is wrong a lot of times. As you mentioned, people get left out and stories get untold. So I wanted to hear you talk about the importance of this perhaps new kind of women's work, and perhaps it's old women's work, but it's coming to the forefront more that we're the ones who manage the family archives, and just the importance of how that shows up in your work and the opportunity for other women artists to dive into this.
Yeah, through this work is how I make sense of the world I'm in currently, how and what I pass on then to my daughter. And so there are moments when it feels sort of all encompassing. It's like what I'm going through personally with family members and then what I'm writing about. And so then such that it's what I'm making work about, dance work, I mean. You delve in it fully. and it changes, you know, your relationship to those archives changes, or, you know, my relationship to the archive changed in part through FIRE. I would have approached its development completely differently, and did in previous work. Have learned to curate in a different way, meaning in terms of the real roots of the word, and in terms of thinking how I could use it for healing. And what I mean is, I remember like so many of the stories that were told about the women in my family, in my maternal line. So many of them were about how they died, right? Versus, and compared to how many stories we heard about how they lived, what they thought, what they liked to do, what they,
what they ate, what they dreamed of. Right?
yes. And so I seek to correct this sort of violence, this sort of erasure, this sort of lack of nuance. I also think I'm of, as you mentioned, of a generation of a people of a time in which, through education, through opportunities that I have as a woman of this modern world today, have the responsibility, like the capacity to discuss and to sort of go into, to sort of go there where perhaps previous generations would not have. And so there's a way then that what's happening now is just always interacting with what was. What was is always interacting with what's happening now. And then, you know, it creates this amazing space for imagination, activation of new possibility, you know.
I had a wonderful conversation with Adama Delphine Fawandi recently, and Jenniwa Moja Nelson, and we talked about how these pieces of what was is woven into the work that becomes, or what is, and in that conversation, fabric came up a lot, and so, you know, I would love to hear for you, what is that reoccurring thread that comes in your work? I food is definitely one, which is definitely why we're interviewing you today. But is there something more specific, like a fabric or even a spice, or what's something that keeps weaving and assisting with that fluidity that you're creating?
Well, yes, it's definitely food, and I want to again point out like how long. You know, I think about the fact of, you know, I've been working for the past several years within mass and carnival aesthetics. And I think about, you know, now I can see it, you know, but, you know, sort of going through time, you know, sort of making a ritual of every carnival heading down. You know, my mother's family is from sort of central Trinidad. And so the carnival that you want to be at is in Port of Spain in the north. And so you have to sort of travel to the north in order to have carnival. And so I would, and that would entail me going to my Auntie Girlie's house, who lived in Port of Spain. And as part of this ritual of going up to the north for carnival, staying at Auntie Girlie's house was her kingfish pilau, which she made for us, because it's like an all-in-one dish with rice and peas, and there's, you know, your protein, your fish in it, and it's like everything, and in one pot, quick, all cooked down in coconut milk. And it's excellent after lots of drinking and, you know, carnivaling in the streets, and it's just like all in one. And having that, and having those years of memories of doing that every carnival, and then her coming up again, because she passed away during the course of me writing my master's, and her recipe for that kingfish pilau showing up there again. And then this summer, of course, it's being on the menu for Eat Little and Live Long. So what I'm trying to speak about is this way that the thing that's consistent, the thing that has the fabric is how I carried these people with me throughout time, how they keep reoccurring, regardless of the newness of the project, they remain. And so, yeah, in the most non-specific way, that's how I would say it.
No, it's so interesting. I think it's quite specific because it's their stories, like their stories are that thread, that you're weaving in and out the work, and and some of the stories you were a part of, clearly this going north, is a story that you're a part of, but then there's some stories that you're not, and that you're only a part of through the retelling and the imagination. But I would definitely say that's specific, and as you talk about it, it's clear in your work that it's there. Yeah. What I would love to this and keeping your archives, I always love to have these conversations and ask, for artists, how do you organize things? Because as an artist, there's so many things. The question we never want to answer.
I'm like, oh, people organize their archives?
Right. You're like, oh, they do that? Right. It's so funny because I think if I did a snippet of every time I ask an artist that, everyone would have the same face like, what? Organize. But, it's a lot of information that we take in, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of information that our hands and our spirits touch.
I don't know if it. Oh, I don't know.
Hi, beautiful.
Cheese.
I just saw this in my
Dolly
house.
Okay, love
you. Thank you. I'm
chest.
sure it'll end up in a beautiful piece of work. We do things differently around here at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Babies and kids are always welcome.
Grown up in the theater, under the table. They've been in pan yards at 4 a.m. in the morning. These children are seasoned. They're
They're ready. I love it. I love it. But yeah, even if it's just one small thing that you do, I figure if we collect little things from each other, maybe we could all get some system. But what's a way that you organize or even decide what to keep and what to release?
Well, that decision, I had the fire burnt up most of it. So it was like, it was a process of what remains, what's here, and how do I determine value on what remains. So some things are, I had, several things stored up in my attic, costumes and books and posters and, tapes, and the little machines to play them in, because I don't have the technology now to play these things. And so for me, it was this paring down process of, okay, well, what remains, and trying to salvage those things, and then attaching meaning, this sort of intense meaning. Oh, what does this mean that this remains? Why do I have this and not other things? And so my archive has become just this. Let me turn this way. This shelf is what remains of my archive of my entire 20-year career in dance. And so it changed. My relationship to it has changed, and part of the reason why it's here, sort of in my workspace and not again up in my attic, is because it's more part of daily life. So I interact with it way more. It's not like this thing boxed away, sort of filed away neatly and just sort of there for the sake of being there. Because most of the things are partly ruined, they're, pages that are half burnt that I've kept. I've committed in one part to, making it sort of part of a larger visual arts project, but I am less precious with it and have the ability to do that versus, storing it away as I did before. So it's really for me become more of a living archive. If there were things that should have been framed, they're framed now versus
Right.
sitting in the box. And so it becomes of my everyday. If there were things I might have that were usable that I wouldn't have used before because I was keeping them for the sake of keeping an archive safe somehow, I use them because it can burn up tomorrow, and then I
Might
don't
as well
even get
use
to use it.
It's
So we use them. There's a lot less preciousness about them, and paradoxically, or perhaps not, they imbue themselves with more meaning, and
Right.
we're actually, me and those who interact with them are more able to speak about them and how they've influenced and influenced our lives.
Wow, that's I love the idea of the archives being a part of the everyday. Because it's so true. Sometimes we put them away and it's like, okay, later, 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 and then later is gone. And and that's it's so interesting at like kind of riding between treating it very precious to giving it this, like using it and doing whatever you can. Like that's such an interesting journey. Can you tell us more about the inspiration for, well, not the inspiration, the Light Fantastical? Talk about this new work that you're creating, what's happening here, and where you're taking us.
Right. So Light, Light, I had just before, it was in August of 2019, it was performed at the Delaware Museum of Art. And then in January of 2020, I think, or maybe it was November of 2019, I was able to perform at El Barrio, and as a duet with the magnificent Mama Diane Harvey Salam. And it's again about lineage and legacy and about my relationship to women and my ancestresses, who I would definitely, include Mama Diane in that. Again, it's about those relationships, within my blood ties, but also beyond. There's a way when even in earlier versions of my work, I found the family tree just quite, like the structure of it quite insufficient, because I'm like, well, what do I do about this uncle who wasn't really an uncle, but was like the best uncle? Or the aunt who was like, not even like family, but like, where do I put them on? Like, my tree has to be a little bit more, it had to reach a bit more. And so Light is about about how we access lineage to project future. And mostly at the core, I think, asked me last 6 months ago, asked me in 3 months, and they might be different, but very much at the core of it is this relationship with the women in my
Wow, I love that. And tell us also about this series that you did over the summer, the Eat Little and Live Long series, and how that came to be. And just what you want to tell us about it. What was happening these weekly meetings that you were having, or how often was it? Because I'm not sure if it was weekly. Was it weekly?
It was weekly, for more or less weekly.
Okay.
For 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks over the course of the summer, from the 5th of July and ending the 4th of September. Eat Little and Live Long is a saying that we have in Trinidad. It's a strategy for survival. It was sort of tongue in cheek to everyone's like COVID weight gain. It was an occasion for us to all get together in a way that was safe. I needed my people needed me. It was a way for me to continue in my work with the Dance and Performance Institute and make sure that artists have a platform on which to share what they've been working on and what they're thinking about in whatever way that they wanted to. So some people did full out performances, full makeup, costume, everything. And other people just, sort of sat there with their laptop and shared notes and thoughts and bits of movement and that kind of thing. So Eat, Listen, and Live Long is something I had actually, in a way, the pandemic made space for it to happen. It was something I'd been thinking of for a long time. I'd always wanted to do this huge project around food and to incorporate these family recipes or to share the knowledge, even just in producing Eat, Live, and Live Long. I reached out to an old high school friend who's now, an amazing chef. And, she joined me in the kitchen and she brought her daughter along. And so, it's us with our daughters in the kitchen and we're back and forth about, whether it's sorrel or hibiscus, what's the right word? And, do you add this or that to it? And it was an absolute dream, absolute dream, affirmed by all of the incredible generosity by both the artists that participated and by the people that I welcomed into my yard. So yeah. I'm not hearing. I am not hearing you.
Apologies. Oh, thank you. Okay. That sounds fantastic. If there's a recipe that's either a part of that project or one that you've already published, I would love for you to submit it to the reclamation exhibition with, so what we're asking for is a recipe that has a family story, and then to include, a picture. And then inside of it, you can also put a link to where more information about the work around it or the stories around it. So that would be great if you could submit that so that could be a
Absolutely.
part of. Yeah. And anyone else that has a family story or a family recipe, we really want the memory part of it too, because we want to keep in mind that we have to reclaim all that goes into the food and all that goes into our nourishment. And it's the memory and the makings around it that are a part of it. Just like you're saying, your people needed you this summer, you needed them. And so you make memories and you make moments that are around the table just as much as the food is on the table. And I think it's fantastic to watch that for you. What is up next for you? And I also want you to tell us where we can find you and how to keep up with you.
You can find me via my website, which www.makitathomas.org, or on Instagram at Makita Thomas Dances. I am actually, looking forward to quite a bit of travel next year. Getting back to Trinidad to do some work in some really cold places. As well, it's been, I've spent the last 15 years more or less really in Trinidad, and so I haven't had a lot of winters here, and so my knees are getting ready for that. I'm really looking forward to getting the institute, the Dance and Performance Institute, which has been on a sort of sabbatical. I didn't feel anxious about having to do things in that regard. The institute focused on a land collective. So again, we're focusing on making space for us to gather within the next couple of years. So that's the focus in regards to the institute. I am looking forward to Carnival 2023. I can't say 2022 because it's been canceled. And a major baby doll project that is very much connected to all of what we spoke about today. So I'm looking to continuing the work, continuing raising my children, and
Well, if you, her website is an excellent resource to be able to get some links and connect to what she's doing and connect to different articles, videos that can tell you way more than we could ever cover in 30 minutes, or in way more than we could even put in some boxes, which we still managed to do.
Look.
Look.
Closing up. She brings a meal of clay.
Thank you,
Which
darling.
means it's like so deep if you know what I've been like thinking about this clay. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have, oh, she's going to make some more. Well, we welcome her addition to the conversation. Of course, she would serve us something plated properly. I love it. Yes, these babies are always ready and always on time.
Always.
Makeda, it is such a pleasure to finally have a chance to be able to talk with you and discuss your work. And we look forward to following your work and hearing more. And hopefully, other people will. I know other people will follow it because it's just so quite interesting. And hearing more and seeing how you dance these memories into your work and give us so much more to talk about again and again.
Thank you so much.
You. Yes. And you can join. Actually, this is our last Curative Collective of this season for the fall. So we are not going to be meeting next Monday. Usually we're every Monday. But Makeda has closed us out this season, properly so. And we've been plated a beautiful dish by her daughter to give us something to feed our souls and imagination. So it's a wonderful way to end it. Makeda, thank you again. And thank everyone that has joined Curative Collection. Have a wonderful